Exactly. Yeah, thanks, Fabian, for the introduction. And I will kind of give you a motivation of why we developed Astro-COLIBRI, kind of following that schematic over there, and guide you a little bit through the history over the last couple of years. First, I would like to give you an idea of this current workshop, and as it's highly related to why we developed Astro-COLIBRI in the first place, I think it's a good way to show that as an overall picture for the introduction. So obviously, the science that we want to understand is what's going on in the universe. Where do all of these high energetic particles that we observe come from? We do that by observing. I mean, obviously also using theory, but observing these events. Then we kind of try to observe these events with follow-up observations. And therefore, we need these alert creators and alert streams that we've heard in the previous session. To show you the current talks in that workshop, you see that with the participants here and the talks that we will hear during these 2 first days, you will see that we kind of cover all of the relevant parts of that whole pipeline, from understanding what's going on physics-wise in these events, up to observing these events in observatories. Then we already heard the alert creator streams and brokers, and we will hear more tomorrow also about follow-up observatories. And an important point is nowadays also include the public with their observations and trying to feed their observations back into the scientific community. The motivation of Astro-COLIBRI was basically that a few years ago we had many different formats that were distributed within the community about new events. And at that time, a few years ago, it was rather difficult to get an overview of what's going on, especially when there are follow-up observations and so on. And we heard in previous talks already that things have changed, so we have better platforms since then. But at that time, that was really the motivation of developing Astro-COLIBRI, and to a large extent, that's still true to connect, for example, gravitational waves with supernova and other events, and try to get a visual overview of what's going on in the transient universe. And that was the idea that we had, to have a cloud-based API that is listening to all of these different streams. And over the time, we included more and more of these streams in Astro-COLIBRI and plan to include further in the future. And within Astro-COLIBRI, then we have our own real-time databases, but we always also access external data, try to get complementary information, and then hopefully provide the best and most relevant information to users. And one important part is that stream over here, which is a real-time alert stream. So people that have installed Astro-COLIBRI on their phones will get a real-time alert and get notified if there's an interesting event that is interesting to them. And within Astro-COLIBRI, there are further tools, such as checking for the visibility of that event for an observatory that is relevant for the user. So you can use Astro-COLIBRI not only to get informed about new events, but also to plan them with follow-up observation. Then moving on now with the history. So the project started 2019, where the first prototype was based on a Python script that one has to start in the terminal. And in that process of starting the Python script, you queried some databases that already existed. And then you visualized basically the result with a cone search showing known sources and other events in that cone search. That was presented 2019. Then we moved on and tried to improve the interaction. So moved on to having a more interactive software product where you can interactively change positions, query other data, and change stuff, and that interactively modified the map where results were shown at that time. But at that time, so we used the framework EEL, which was really nice in communicating between Python and the front end. It was kind of easy to use, but the limitation was that we couldn't publish it on a website. So it was a tool that a user would have to install on the computer. And in August 2020, we then decided that that's not an ideal situation, and we want to start all over again with something that's more scalable and we can deploy on a website. So that's easier for users to just go there and check for the latest events. And 1 year later, we actually managed to finalize the first version. We released that publicly in August 2021, and also published a paper describing all the technical details, but also the science cases and the use cases of Astro-COLIBRI. And Mathieu will talk afterwards, explaining all of the details if you don't know them already, and guide you through the interface. And one important aspect is to provide applications so that users can have information when they're not in front of their computers. So also real-time alerts that are mobile. And that's an interesting aspect because we learned that GCN already had these phone alerts, and we were kind of introducing them back 30 years later, but in a more modern approach because you get notifications on your mobile device then. The next step then is September 2022, where we had many updates since August 21. Mostly including new streams of events. For example, now we show supernovas and mostly supernovas, but many more features, such as many more links to other services and so on. So there was like, at least we thought, an improvement in usability of the tool with better links to other services. And the timeline was also something that was introduced in that version over there. So you can not only get a spatial overview of events, but you also can now see the events happening in a timeline order. So you can filter by time, for example, by observatories and so on. So you have a new component of filtering events and displaying them. Then a next big step was in actually this year, not long ago, where we introduced gravitational waves. So now we display the uncertainty regions of gravitational waves and also TilePy, which was introduced last week, and it's a planning tool for gravitational wave follow-up observations, and was also integrated to Astro-COLIBRI. And recent updates, also explained by Mathieu in detail, were performed and published this month, just a few days actually ago, where you now can filter here more specifically also for certain thresholds of magnitudes and so on. So there are much better filter capabilities now in Astro-COLIBRI. And yeah, also available on mobile devices, obviously. And that's something we want to share that kind of illustrates the usage of Astro-COLIBRI since it was released mid-2021. And these represent the number of installs on Android, and for iOS, that's kind of similar. And what we notice over time is that the number of installs really changed when there were some press releases and where Astro-COLIBRI was kind of described much more than when we published papers such as here, obviously, because that was more relevant than for the science community. But the press releases got the public interested in Astro-COLIBRI, and many people joined. And one interesting case is also the recent collaboration with SETI and the link to Unistellar. And there was also a press release, and we noticed that especially in the US, there was an increase in users that you can also see in the overall usage of Astro-COLIBRI. It is used kind of globally. We are represented in all continents, with most users in the US and France and Germany. but there is coverage over the whole world. The architecture of Astro-COLIBRI is modular in a sense that we have this listener tool that listens to these different streams and then sends updates and information to our centralized API that's running in the cloud. And that's basically where all the computations happen, all the correlations with other databases and so on, with our own database, but also with other databases. And then that process doesn't take long because it's really scalable in the cloud. And then you can get real-time alerts via that API and some notification framework to mostly mobile apps and mobile devices. And from there, you can then query. So if you make a cron search or if you request visibility information, you go back to the API and then gain that information. Yeah, that's it with the history of Astro-COLIBRI. If you have any further questions regarding the history, yes.